Greetings, programs, and welcome to the Awesome Friday podcast, the only podcast on the whole internet that talks about two movies at a time. We are unique and different and special in this way. My name is Matthew, and I'm your host. This week, we'll be talking about the horror movie Abigail and the coming-of-age story, The People's Joker, which is fascinating that it exists at all. And with me today is my co-host, Simon. How are you, Simon? Say hello to all of our listeners.
Well, if you've already listened to our bonus round, you'll know that I'm sick as a dog. I have just to be really original, I have a horrible virus that's going around that my wife had, and then my daughter had, and now I've got it. And my son, in typical fashion, has just matrixed his way, neoed his way around all the bugs, and he's fine. So my wife had it for 2 weeks. This is my second week, and my daughter had it for 2 days. Isn't it wonderful to be old? But no, we're fine. Just lots going on here at the moment. It's lots and lots and lots. But because I had a really, last week was just horrible. It was so much went on last week. And I couldn't make recording, couldn't watch anything. So this week I intentionally and purposefully made time to watch movies while I worked. I was just doing PowerPoint stuff all week. And so I watched as many movies as I could for my own mental health. And that was really nice. It turns out I really like movies. Who thought? Who'd have known?
I mean, that's a shock. That's a shock to me that you enjoy the medium of film.
So I had a couple of things that are on my watch list for ages that I finally got around to. Like Quarantine 2, which was much better than expected. I watched Love Lies Bleeding, I think if it had tightened in and focused on one thing a bit more, it would have been really, really good. But the two leads are excellent. At least Frankenstein, which did not work at all, did not like the fat film at all. I watched it with my wife and she hated it. American Fiction, which... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
It seems like the kind of thing your wife might actually enjoy, too.
Yeah, right? And she was frustrated with it too because it has great potential. And Cole Sprouse, who I've never seen in anything before, I hear he's some kind of heartthrob. He does a lot of physical work in this. He's really doesn't say a word for the whole thing. And he's on
the Hot Archie That Fucks show.
Is he one of those? Is he?
Yeah.
He's excellent. He's excellent in this film. Catherine Newton is not, but she's massively over-directed and it's all overwritten and it's not good. Luckily, Catherine Newton is fantastic in the other thing we're talking about this week. And then I watched American Fiction, which I really liked up until the point I didn't, which is sort of the last 10 minutes, really. But yeah, movies are great. And the first half of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, can't wait to watch the second half of that film. Let me tell you, champing at the bit.
We rewatched Ghostbusters Afterlife last night because my wife is sick, and that's the kind of thing we do when we're sick. And I haven't watched Frozen Empire yet. I do want to. But it is amazing upon rewatch of Afterlife how if the film would just get out of its own way and tell the family story, it might have actually been pretty good. The family stuff is pretty good, but it keeps stopping to be like, hey, do you remember that thing from that better movie from your childhood?
For me, Frozen Empire is worse so far. The first hour of Frozen Empire is more than Afterlife, and Afterlife was really bad for that. I'm not enjoying it at all.
I haven't seen it, but my personal favorite thing is that it seems like in Afterlife they go out of their way to say that like all the ghosts were gone. We thought we did our job too well. There was no ghost to bust, and we went out of business. And apparently in Afterlife, it's like, well, there's been ghosts this whole time, and we haven't been around. Like it's almost like it sounds like, and again I haven't seen it, but it sounds like it's basically ignoring a pretty key point of Afterlife.
Oh, in Frozen Empire, yeah. Frozen Empire, the jump from the end of Afterlife to the beginning of Frozen Empire. I turned to my wife and was like, didn't the last one end like this? Like, has there been something I've missed in the middle of these two films? Because they just decided, okay, well, in this film, there's just Ghostbusters are just like established and funded, and there's ghosts everywhere. in New York.
So there is a post-credit scene in Afterlife, which I had never seen before. I actually was talking to my wife about the movie, and post-credit scene came on. I was like, "Oh, I haven't seen this before." Where Ernie Hudson's character, where Winston decides to reset up the Ghostbusters, he buys the building back and drives the Ecto-1 into the garage. And then there's an ominous shot of the warning light on the containment system, blinking.
A slight spoiler. You know, in Ghostbusters 1984, when they buy the dilapidated fire hall because there's nowhere else for them to go, and it's just a random place they buy. Guess what? Anyway,
I much prefer the version of this in, and you love this movie more than I do, but I do like in the 2016 film where they find that building, and she's like, and as soon as they're told the price, they're like, "Shit, we can't afford that," and they just walk away.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
2016 is the only Ghostbusters sequel that gets remotely close to the tone of the original Ghostbusters, which was written as a nerdy comedy. And I want people to remember it was written by comedians with a bunch of washed-up scientists talking science to each other, and these new films really just missed that mark, wildly.
You know what I think most of the Ghostbusters, and maybe Afterlife, or maybe Frozen Empire is different because I think Dan Aykroyd is actually in the movie in a meaningful way, from what it seems like. But one thing they're also missing is that Dan Aykroyd believes all this shit. So, and I feel like that really informs the filmmaking. But if you're not aware of this, Dan Aykroyd believes in ghosts and all kinds of crazy shit, and it is fascinating to learn about that. And I think it does actually really inform the filmmaking.
Absolutely, his dad wrote a whole ass book about ghost discovery and ghost hunting and ghost finding.
There's a fascinating documentary about Dan Aykroyd, which last time I looked was still on YouTube. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but where they're asking him about conspiracy theories and things like crystal skulls, and he's speaking with 100% certainty. It's fascinating to watch. And I'm glad for him that it exists,
Yeah. But yeah,
Dan Aykroyd unplugged on UFOs. He's talking about UFOs. It's something. It is something else.
I will definitely watch that.
Oh, and look at that! There it is. First result on YouTube. I will put that in the show notes because holy shit! You haven't lived until you've seen a rich crazy person talking about their crazy shit.
Robbie Williams, pop star Robbie Williams disappeared for about 4 or 5 years, grew a long beard, and became an expert on UFO sightings, and went very, very deep down UFO truther. And then realized he was out of money, so he had to shave and came back and released some more music. But that was fun to watch.
Sure. That guy seems balanced. At least he didn't go down the Russell Brand alt-right white supremacist thing.
Who saw that coming?
Remember when he was the next big thing?
Yes. You talk about Ricky Gervais's shtick, which I can just about put up with. But we watched a wonderful movie. I really enjoyed it. Bedtime Stories with Adam Sandler. And the book is lovely as well. That's based on. But Ricky Gervais, not Ricky Gervais, what's his face that we were just talking about?
Russell Brand.
Russell Brand is the kooky British punky best friend in it. Just I haven't seen Forgetting Sarah Marshall for a while, but I'm not sure. I love that film, but I'm not sure I could put up with the whole movie of that shtick anymore.
Forgetting Sarah Marshall is okay because he's not the focus of it, but Get Him to the Greek, which is a sequel to that film, is much harder to get through. Not only because Russell Brand is the focus, but because Jonah Hill is the straight man in that film, and he's also become super problematic recently, and it's
has he?
a tough one. Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Just live in bliss, man. Don't. Just...
This is my life now. I'm off social media. I don't know who.
The long and the short of it is that
people
it
are ruining their
basically
lives.
the long and the short of it is basically that he revealed himself to be a controlling and emotionally, mentally abusive and manipulative person to his partner.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, like to the point where he was with this woman who is a surf instructor, and he like slid into her DMs, and they ended up getting together. And at the start, it was one of those things where at the start he was like, "I love that you're a surfer. Your photos are so beautiful," and then like while they were together, he was like, "You got to stop posting photos of yourself in a bikini. I just can't handle it. Like you got to stop. But she's a surf instructor, dude. Like,
What?
and that's like, if you don't like it, you could leave. You know, like, like that was just like the tip of a very deep iceberg. It's awful.
Wow.
And like when you read it, like the language in the messages that were leaked is very, very manipulative in a very disappointing way. But anyway,
you know, famous men, you could just not be idiots about women if you want. You could just not be controlling assholes. That's a choice you have, is to not abuse your power and be nice.
Yeah, I don't think it's fame that makes an asshole an asshole. I just think it exacerbates the situation. Anyway, so that's very much like nothing we're about to talk about.
Yes.
But let's dive in. We're going to talk about two movies as we usually do this week, and we're going to start with a movie. And I'd like you to give us the lowdown on this film.
Yeah.
So let's talk about The People's Joker, which is a film that is, well, why don't you tell us what kind of film it is? Because I'm having trouble putting my thoughts together about it.
Gonzo comic epic. So The People's Joker, it's funny actually, this has been around for a couple of years, and the focus has been on this the creator called Vera Drew, who I believe uses she pronouns. It's never actually stated. I could look this up, but hey. Anyway, it's basically using the whole DC Comics, especially the Joker, as a metaphor for trans awakening and sort of teen exploration. And turns out it works really well as a metaphor. Like the Joker, especially, choosing to put this face on, choosing to put this character, and changing personalities to fit who the kind of person they think they really are. And on paper, it sounds like a disaster. So this has been shopped around for a couple of years, and the focus has been on person made a Joker, a trans Joker film, and then DC protected their copyright as they are lawfully obliged to do so, and said, "You've made this unauthorized thing based on the things we own. You have to stop." And so a lot of the publicity has been, "Oh, DC are shutting us down. They've been terrible. They're restricting our freedom of speech or artistic fair use and all this." And it got as far as in TIFF. It was showing at the Toronto International Film Festival, and there was one show, and then DC lawyers descended and got it taken off from TIFF. So DC were the bad guys here because they were protecting their copyright, and this has happened a lot in game making as well. Like copyright characters are used, and then people get surprised when the owners force it to close down, as they are legally obliged to do so if they want to maintain their copyright. So part of copyright law is you must prosecute those who exploit your copyright. So I went into this honestly thinking this is just going to be, I thought it was actually a documentary about DC closing down this film. So what it actually is this almost like gonzo film journal of this one creator explaining their journey from being a young boy, falling in love with comics, feeling that they're different, feeling that they might be in the wrong body, and then the parental trauma that comes with that, and trying to exist in a space where they don't know who they are, in a comedic space where the comedy was very, very bland and very, very controlled. it's really hard to describe, but I think it's quite an important film, and I ended up coming out of it thinking this. It's the antithesis of pretty much every other film we see. Like there's no control going into it. The things that they do with the characters are kind of unbelievable, and in the artistic license and the shade they throw at many people. But I think it works. I was really surprised at how much it worked and how actually funny it was, because usually, like, basically it's a fancy student film, and usually they're not written very well, they're not acted well, and the jokes aren't funny. And I thought it was quite well written. I thought it was particularly well acted, and especially by the guy who plays the Joker, a guy called Kane Disler, who I thought was like really important to the story and had really good delivery. But also at the end of it, it's actually got really worthwhile things to say in it, and it uses film techniques in kind of a punk way. Like if you compare the difference between a published comic and like a self-published, I can't remember the name for the when you self-publish a comic, but that kind of unhinged, uncontained fury and energy and politics and statement and sex and sexuality, and it's all there. And I'm not surprised DC have tried to close it down, because it pretty much goes against any kind of control that they've had with this character over the years, like beyond the copyright they have with their character. There's an interesting discussion here as to should DC have just allowed it, because I think it is an important film. I'm not sure they're allowed to when it comes to their copyright. But
So I'm just going to jump in very quickly and say that in terms of the copyright thing, you're actually wrong. There's no obligation to defend copyright. There is an obligation to defend a trademark, though. But copyright is not like you don't have to defend it if you have something trademarked and somebody uses it and you don't defend it, you could lose it. That is not the same with copyright. You do not have to defend it. It might conceivably, if you decide to try and defend it later, lessen your case if you don't, but you're actually under no obligation to do it. Especially in a case like this, which I think there's a fairly strong argument to say that it is a fair use of the copyright. So that's just my 2 cents on that particular part of the situation.
So I thought it had something really important things to say, and I think someone's going to watch this and be educated by it and be moved by it, and for that reason alone, I'm glad it exists, and it's not at all the film I thought it would be. And it's for a film that really has no budget and no control. It's actually it's got a good flow. It's got a good pace. It's got it's pretty snappy, and by the end of it, I really felt like I'd learned something about someone going through that human experience. And I think it's especially useful for maybe people who don't really understand. They understand the concept of trans, but don't understand the gender fluidity or basic, like a man deciding to be a woman physiologically. And I think it really plays well with Dave Chappelle has a good joke about this when his whole trans thing came out, about this trans person he knew, and his, without retelling the whole story, his whole point was that it doesn't matter whether you understand it or not. It's important that you appreciate that a human is going through something, that it's a human experience that they are feeling. And this film really sort of unpatronizingly finds that point as well. It's like, it doesn't matter if you don't agree or understand it, but it helps you appreciate that someone went through something and found a place to not be sad anymore. And I think that's really important. I think it's a good educational tool, and it would be nice if I don't know what its distribution situation is, but it would be nice if this is in a place where people can watch it. People that might need to see it, because I certainly learned quite a lot from it as well. What do you think of it?
Yeah, I'm basically going to mirror all of the things that you're saying here. Um, they, it's definitely not the film that I thought it was going to be, um, but it is, I think, an interesting and important work. That yeah, basically chronicles a person's self discovery, and uses IP they're clearly connected to in order to tell that story. Um, I think DC should have just let it through. I think that it fully qualifies as a fair use of the copyright to make that exploration. I get that Warner Brothers is the worst, so I'm not going to pass judgment on that beyond that. But it's definitely an interesting film. I think it's one that everyone should see just because it's had such a hard time coming out too. Like my view again is that this is very much fair use, and the DC squashing it in 2022, and then I guess again in 2023 a little bit at Fantasia where they had limited showings, uh, is an example of like a big company like it's actually another mark on DC's record as being sort of anti-art. Honestly, what with their whole shelving of films in the last several years and cutting budgets and all that kind of stuff. But I think you're right. I think that it's an important film. I think lots of people should see it. My worry about it, honestly, is that the people who probably need to see it most won't. Uh, you know, um, and a lot of the people who could possibly learn something from it, there's at least a subset of those people who are going to sort of bounce off the filmmaking style, which is a bit manic's the wrong word, but like a lot of it is basically like it's a monologue that is told in like live action snippets along with animated snippets. It's very chaotic in a way that I fully believe comes together, but I think some people will probably bounce off of before getting a chance to learn anything, because it is told in a very chaotic is the best word. It's a very chaotic movie, in a good way. Um, but again, I think the people who like most need to listen to it in terms of like educating themselves about trans issues are probably not going to see it or learn anything from it. But that being said, lots and lots of younger people or people who are maybe going through something like some gender dysphoria or trying to figure out who they are and where they fit in the world are going to be able to watch this film and be like, oh yeah, like this is a thing. Like it's a human experience that I am experiencing, and I shouldn't feel shame. I should be able to explore this. I am so yeah. I think it's an incredibly important film. I think it's going to have more impact with people who are coming into these issues than the people who are passing judgment on them, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I kind of wish that they had not used the DC characters, because Warner would never ever going to let this through, ever, because this is the company they are, for every reason that you stated. This was never going to happen. They're not going to suddenly wake up and go, actually, yes, you can use our characters for your trans story. It's never going to happen. So by making it, and then I feel like making it, they had to have known that it was going to be restricted, and Warner's in every right to say you can't use our characters. They have their right to do that, whether you agree with it artistically or not. And I think if they'd obviously it wouldn't have the same impact, because the metaphor does work so well with this specific characters. It works really well with the Joker and the Batman and their characters they have, and there's actually tons in there for comic book fans who know these characters going, oh yeah, okay, that all like maps, and they've actually done really intelligent sort of metaphor mapping against like Poison Ivy and Catwoman, and it's really well done. So it would have lost something if they'd been analogs, right? It's like the Austin Powers thing. It looks like Godzilla, but it is not Godzilla. Like something that looks the same, and then it wouldn't have been held up, and maybe it could have got in front of more eyeballs. And I think it's too important a film for I think it would be more beneficial to make sure more people see it with a less precise metaphor than using the characters.
I would say that if they did that though, that it probably would have faded away faster. You know, like I think that using those characters as a hook to get people in front of it is important. And if they just made a chaotic indie movie where it was like it's kind of the Joker, but it's not, it probably would have just faded into obscurity after a festival run. And
they thank Warner Brothers Discovery, don't they, in the credits for the publicity?
Yeah, and not just because of that though, but because like I think if you put this movie in front of someone without a character they already recognize, or without an idea of a character they already recognize, they would be like, "Why would I watch this?" Right? Like, it sounds like I'm saying they're being sneaky, and sneaky is a sort of a negative word, but like they are using a character that people love to get them in front of a story that they might not otherwise get in front of. And if they don't use that character, then that doesn't happen. So I do think it's important that they did it the way they did it. And yeah, I mean, I don't particularly want to get into the weeds on like the particular copyright, but you're not wrong. The Warner Brothers is a litigious company that is, I fully believe at this point, with their current leadership, a little bit anti-art, which is hilarious to me. Hilarious because if I don't laugh, I'll cry.
I did cry when TCM did a retrospective of the importance of Warner Brothers through the years, and it was just when Zaslav had closed down the the Roadrunner movie, and it was very, very clear that it's money. Like Warner Brothers now is about money and discovery and synergy and streaming, and they did this 10-minute review of Warner Brothers since the inception of cinema and all these movies that came out of that studio, and I got really teary. I got really, really emotional over it because it's just gone. That whole legacy has gone by people with Excel spreadsheets, and it's heartbreaking. It really is.
It's like the the best phrase, I can't remember who said it now, but the best phrase I've seen describing it is that it used to be that every studio head wanted to be Jack Warner, and now they all want to be Mark Zuckerberg. They all want to be tech bros raking in the money. And it reminds me also, Walt Disney famously at one point said, we don't make movies to make money, we make money to make movies. And I feel like that has been lost in a number of studios today. Interestingly, not the least of which is Disney. So I don't know. The point is that like this movie's out now. It's in a rollout, cinematic rollout, and I hope that lots and lots and lots and lots of people go see this movie. I think it'll be educationally important for lots of people. I think it'll be a relatable story for a lot of people. And I hope that everyone who needs to see it. I think that most people need to see it, honestly.
Yeah.
I think it's important, and I think it's also a fairly singular piece of art. And I, if nothing else, think that that's important, right? I think that it is, art is important. We need art in our lives, and this is a great example of using art that you love to relate your own story.
Yeah.
And that's an important function of art, is you discover yourself via art. You discover humanity via art. And this is using art to make art, and it is great as a result.
And it's not preachy or patronizing at all, or judgmental at all. And it's I think that's a really clever and difficult balance to find, which I would recommend, even if there's lots of people who don't agree with trans, and there's lots of people who find it difficult to understand and would not choose to go and see a movie about a trans character. And I think don't be put off. If you're one of those people, don't be put off by this film, because it actually has some educational content and is not judgmental or patronizing or preachy at all. It's good.
I mean, you can't agree or disagree with trans, though. So some people are just bigots and not going to see it.
Oh, I think it's difficult. It's a difficult concept to understand for a lot of people, I think. And I think an education around that is really important. I think that's what this film does really, really well.
Oh yeah, but I'm not saying you can't agree or disagree with it. You can understand it or not, but you can't like agree with it or not. It is a thing that exists, and it has always existed. But
Yeah, so
that's maybe a deeper conversation than this podcast warrants.
Yeah, by agree, I mean that you can have, when you agree with something, it can be from moral and a personal point of view as well. And I think that this film might turn a few opinions, and I think that alone is a very important thing.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like I say, like it needs to be in front of lots of different eyeballs for lots of different reasons. So how many stars are you coming down with for the People's Joker?
4 stars for me. I was really impressed with it, with its kind of unhinged psychedelic approach, but also it got there in the end. It wasn't just lunacy like that beaver, hundreds of beavers, which it didn't get to the point of being a cohesive film for me. I thought this was a really cleverly made and important film. 4 stars.
Yeah, I'll say 4 as well, for all the reasons stated. And actually, Hundreds of Beavers is an interesting comparison, just because like that movie is a analog to a certain film style, not using it directly, and I think it's less successful as a result. But I know that we're both in the minority on that film. Lots of people love it, so. And I do think that movie's important. Like I think its existence is also important, but for different reasons. But anyway, so that the People's Joker is actually in a limited rollout in cinemas now. So we are here in Vancouver, BC, and if you are in Vancouver, BC, and you have any interest in seeing this film, it is playing at the Rio on the 14th, which is 2 days from today. And if you are anywhere near in the coming week, I'm not going to go through the whole list, but in the coming week, it is opening in Bellingham, Washington, Worcester, Massachusetts, Cincinnati, Charlottesville, Richmond, Virginia, Atlantic Highlands in New Jersey, Rochester, Duluth, Spokane, and then Memphis, Santa Fe. Like it's all over the place. You can go to the website for the movie, which is alteredinnocence.net/The People's Joker. I will put that in the show notes to see a full list of where it's playing and when. And if you can see it in a cinema, I would recommend that because it is a singular experience. That being said, it is not announced how or when or where, but this movie is getting both a physical release and a streaming deal reportedly, so it will be out in a way where you can see it eventually. But for now, it is going to be playing it's playing in cinemas all over North America through at least July is where they have listings for. So definitely make the time to go see it. If you have literally any interest at all for any reason, go see it. If you know someone who's trans, go see it. If you are trans, go see it. There's lots of reasons to go see it. It is a singular piece of art and definitely worth your eyeball time. So go see it.
I'd say if you don't get it, go see it. And that's going to be brave of you to make that choice, and I appreciate that. And if you don't, go see it. Go and if you come out the same, then you come out the same. But I think there's something in there for you.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the people who it will challenge the most are the people who most need to see it.
Yeah, that's true.
So, anywho, let's move on. Let's move on to our next film, which is the locked house horror thriller Abigail. Abigail is a story about several professionals. There's a medic, a driver, muscle, a hacker, and so on. Pretty standard team of thieves who, at the very beginning of the film, abduct a young girl called Abigail and take her to a house at the behest of mob henchmen under the guise of, we're going to use this to blackmail a powerful person. And you only have to babysit her for 24 hours. And then, pretty immediately, and actually not that immediately, people start disappearing in the house, and it's revealed that Abigail is actually a little girl vampire who's going to kill them all. And that's kind of all I want to say about the movie in terms of the basic plot points. because I feel like anything further, I mean, that's all in the trailer. But anything further kind of gets into spoilery territory that might be bad if this is the kind of film you might like. So that's all I'm going to say. But that being said, this is a very fun movie. This movie was sort of divisive when it came out in cinemas a couple weeks ago, and I don't get it because it's fun. Is it a little bit slow at times? Sure, but those slow moments often have character information in them that is very interesting. The cast is exceptional. Melissa Barrera is fully established as a sort of scream queen at this point, and she's now worked with the directors Bettinelli-olpin and Gillett, who famously directed Scream and Scream 6, I want to say, with her in it. Dan Stevens, who in his second of 3 incredible character performances potentially this year, I haven't seen the third one yet. Alicia Weir, who's like, how old is she in real life? She's playing a 12-year-old. She is 14 in real life. She is a pretty convincing ballerina and goes all in on the vampireness of her character. Catherine Newton is in this as the hacker, and she is sort of, once it's revealed exactly who she is and like who her character is and why, like, it makes sense, and it's not a surprise, but she plays it so well that it's a really fun reveal. Kevin Durant is in this as the big dumb muscle guy, and he is wonderful. He's so good, playing a slightly dumber version of the sort of menacing big guy that he often gets cast to play. And then you also have Angus Cloud, who unfortunately passed away before this film came out, who is very, very interesting as the sociopathic wheelman. And then Giancarlo Esposito shows up as the guy who's recruited them all. And I don't know, man, this movie is, half a dozen archetype characters interacting with one another while a monster hunts them. And that is fun. That'll never not be fun if it's executed with any amount of thought. And this is executed with a lot of thought. So it's pretty fun. I don't know. What did you think about it? I thought it was really fun. I wish that I had seen it. I wish I had seen it in cinemas.
Yeah, me too. I had a fucking ball. I mean, this formula, it's the same directors as Ready or Not and Scream 5 and 6, and the formula now is pretty apparent, but they're so good at it, and it's got so many elements that everything I want from this particular genre of a disparate bunch of quarreling crooks locked in a place against a monster is pretty much my happy place, and it's executed really, really well. I don't think it holds its pace up to the end very well, and there's a couple of scenes that have an additional element to them that really drop the pace. But just adding to everything you say, everyone is great. Melissa Barrera might be the most beautiful person on the planet, especially when she's drenched in blood and viscera. Dan Stevens is the kind of actor I always wanted to be. I think he's just magnificent in everything, and he is having such a good time, and he knows exactly what kind of film this is. Everyone does, really. And I'm really impressed with Issy Weir as well, because she's to go from Matilda to this is quite the right turn, and she is she's fantastic and has a transformation from very delicate, very vulnerable little girl to someone who is very much not a little girl or delicate or vulnerable. And I really, really, really wish the trailers had kept that a secret. I wish I learned that she's the monster live in the film. I wish the trailer would just be like, they've kidnapped this girl and now there's something hunting them and it's getting them one by one. And I wonder, because it's named after her, they would probably have to rename the film. And honestly, if you've seen Megan, it's pretty similar approach to Megan. Terrifying dancing little girl kills people. I mean, it's a shame that they're so close in its formula. So I can see why they would want to get people in. But I wonder, because it didn't have a very long film run, I don't think it made much impact. And I wonder if it had been one of those films where it kind of plays on the fact of you don't actually know what's happening from the trailer. That word of mouth of you would never guess what's actually going on. They, if you look at the Japanese release One Cut of the Dead, the entire marketing campaign marketed that movie as a homemade zombie movie where the zombies come alive, and it's not until you watch that movie and you realize that's only half the film, and then the other half of the film is the real film. It is so satisfying to be led down that path, and then the film goes, actually, it's this. And I really wonder if this film would have benefited by hiding that twist, like in insinuating that the person they think, or the danger that they initially think is the thing hunting them, could have been used as a double bluff in the entire marketing, I think, because there's enough footage there to cut a trailer where you don't know it's Abigail. You don't know it's the little girl. And I think that would have been a great reveal to be like, oh shit, she's the vampire. But it's there in the trailer, so you know it's coming.
Yeah, and there's a moment where it feels like that they're going to do more with it.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
and that like that the reason Abigail is revealed as being the vampire in the trailer is only half the story, and in a lot of ways it kind of isn't. So I don't disagree with you. I think the other option would be to just like, because it's not really in the film revealed that she's the vampire until like halfway in. So the other option would have been to just like, as soon as Giancarlo Esposito leaves and just like closes the door and says like good luck, and then like immediately she's the vampire. Like just make it a monster movie from the start would have been the other option. So I don't disagree with anything you're particularly saying. But again, like I think it's a pretty minor nitpick. Like I think that the other reason to do it the way they did is that like we are trapped in a house with a 12-year-old vampire ballerina is a pretty great hook. And a much better selling point than we kidnapped a girl and now there's a monster after us. I think that knowing what the monster is diminishes it in one way, but is a much better hook than the other. You know what I mean? Like I sort of get the choice, even though I'm sort of on the fence about whether it's the right choice.
And this is a Universal film. This is part of their re-establishment of their sort of monster, if not universe, then there's certainly their reputation for making monster movies. They got Wolfman coming out as well. This is part of that campaign. So I can see what you're saying, that they would want to make it very, very clear that this is one of their properties. Apparently, this is a remake of an old Universal film, or conceptual remake anyway, if not exact. I haven't looked into that at all, but I read that somewhere. The nice thing as well that Catherine Newton, who I saw, who was not good in Lisa Frankenstein, is fantastic in this, and she has, like many of them, like many people do in vampire movies, she has a moment to play a different character, and she's great. She's really, really great. She really separates out the two sides of the person she plays really, really clearly, and it's very, very good. Mm-hmm. I just wish the end is kind of a bit loose, and it's got lots of layers that you think is like the climax, and then another layer is added, and there's some very late sort of matchups that happen, and I wish the last 20 had been a bit tighter, a bit more focused, but I just had a blast. I had a ball. This kind of film is completely made for me. It's everything I look for in a funny monster movie. One thing I did think is that he's very hard to imitate, but this could have really used like Sam Raimi just to up the kind of the shocks a bit. If you compare this to Drag Me to Hell, which is a legitimately hilarious movie in the darkest way possible, I think this could have benefited from a bit of his sense of humor and some of his shots as well. In that the formula, it is getting a bit formulaic from these filmmakers, but when the formula is this tight and it's this enjoyable, then I don't really care that much. I had a blast.
Yeah, I did too. I think you probably had a bit more fun than I did from the sounds of it, but I enjoyed it very much, and I think this is going to become one that like ends up getting rewatched a lot in my household.
Mm-hmm.
Along with, we've watched Scream and Scream 6. We've watched a bunch of times each.
Mm-hmm.
For the same reason, like they're very competently made, and they get the formula that they're going for.
Mm-hmm.
And I do like that they've taken inspiration from the film you're talking about, that it's a loose remake of, is Dracula's Daughter, which is technically, I think, part of the, depending who you talk to, is part of the Universal Monster Verse. But I think they also have said that, like, that this is not connected to the Mummy, the 2017 Mummy, like the Dark Universe.
Oh yeah, that's dope.
But it does sort of allow these films to exist in a way with shared continuity, even if that isn't the intent. It's an interesting needle they're trying to thread with it. And there is a cameo at the end that implies bigger things, I think, that hopefully they're able to build on over time. I hope they do it. I don't know that they will, because this movie did not make any money. With like I think it made like $40 million on a $25 million budget, which is, it's honestly shocking that that's a disappointment to me. But you know, you gotta make more than twice as much as you cost in order to be a hit, right? I'm sorry, it made $36 million on a $28 million budget, so it's even worse than I thought.
Yeah.
But if this movie manages to find its feet on home video, so what I'm saying here, folks, is that, like, rent this movie, buy this movie, stream this movie, and maybe we'll get more of these kinds of movies.
It's a really good time. You won't regret it. It's definitely it's very rewatchable, and they use like Evil Dead Rise, they've discovered the delights of physical blood and bits of bodies. There's no CGI blood in this, and it's all that a lot of their marketing has been about how much blood they used. And
well, to be fair, there is also a lot of CGI blood in this.
Right. I didn't.
But there is at least 3 or 4 tanker trucks full of real fake blood too.
Yeah, there's a lot of guts in here. It's good.
Yeah.
So how many stars are you giving Abigail then?
For me, it's a 3. You know, it's perfectly serviceable, very rewatchable. Yeah, I liked it. 3 stars. You?
It's a 4 for me, but it's just plays directly into what I love.
I think for me, ultimately what happens is that, like, there's a couple of times where, and to be fair, I'm not 100% sure how I would change it, but there's a couple of times where it gets a little bit too slow. Where there's it needs to be tightened up. You mentioned the third act. I think it's actually mostly in the second where it needs to be tightened up a little bit.
The elevator, right? That whole elevator sequence.
Yeah, that's one of them for sure. And I don't quite know how I would change it, and I don't really like to engage in that speculation too much. But, like, there's just a couple of times where it sort of stays in that valley for too long. You know, between the movie has to be a sine wave and its peaks and valleys, and they need to be roughly equal in a film like this, and they're just not, and it sort of drags it down a little bit, but not to the point of being bad. Like, this is a fun movie. Like, definitely see this movie. This movie, as with Simon, this movie is going to be some of you's bag exactly. So, yeah.
For sure. I wonder if it had been released at Halloween, if it had a few more legs as well. It's hot outside, and it's maybe not the kind of movie people want to see in a nice warm May.
I don't know. Honestly, this is the kind of movie where if they stuck a Christmas tree and some lights, it would have been a perfect Christmas release.
That's true.
Yes. We kidnapped the mob boss's daughter on Christmas Eve.
At Christmas Eve.
Like, that is a good movie. And there's a couple of great kills with, like, the electricity from some lights or something, you know, and, like, someone gets hung by Christmas lights. It writes itself.
That really would have been better. Yeah, absolutely. And Dan Stevens at some point could have gone ho 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 as he killed someone. Like, even better.
that is definitely Kevin Durant's line.
Man, he's good in this, and he's huge. And then I told you about this. I saw an interview with him. Apparently, he does mocap for one of the new apes in the new Apes films.
He's in the new Planet of the Apes movie. He's like the king of the apes.
Right. Oh, okay. And he moved across. Like, I just seen him as this like bumbling buffoon. I can't really sure where I've seen him before. I'm sure I've seen him in tons of stuff.
You have seen him in so many things.
When he did like demonstration of his like ape body, he is in control of every ounce of that body. It's incredible. His physicality is amazing. Really cool.
Like I'm just gonna go for a few things that he has been in.
Who's he in Real Steel?
He's one of the other fighters, isn't he? He's one of the heavies in 3:10 to Yuma. He's Little John in the Russell Crowe Robin Hood movie. He is one of the other fighters in Real Steel. He's in one of the Resident Evils. He is in Fruitvale Station as the cop, and holy shit. What else? He's in Noah, which I know is a divisive movie, but I think is well worth seeing for anyone. He's going to be in the upcoming Naked Gun reboot, which I'm very excited about. But he's also like a dedicated Canadian actor. He had a main role in Dark Angel. He showed up on Stargate SG-1 a lot, or at least 3 or 4 times, and lots of TV that's shot in either Vancouver or Toronto. Like if you've watched shows that are shot here, you've probably seen him in stuff. So he's a guy who's been around a long time and has been very reliably like the muscle guy behind the main guy and to the right for a long time. And I'm so happy that he gets a chance to sort of be a bit more of a showcase in this film.
Yeah, definitely.
And like he's just so good, and I'm glad he might be starting to get his due, is what I'm trying to say.
Excellent.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw that far, but he had a great like 10 or 12 episode run on Lost as well in one of the later seasons.
I did, yeah. I recognize him from Lost.
Yeah.
I've just seen his picture.
So, I mean, he's also one of the heavies in the Rock version of Walking Tall, which I don't think is a good movie, but is also a fun movie I've rewatched about 1 billion times. So
I have not seen that film.
I mean, it's very much an early The Rock film. Put it that way. In some ways, it's better than many current The Rock films. It's when he was still trying to act and not just be The Rock in movies. You know.
Yes.
Yeah. I also like that he's from Ontario, and I believe he's actually like his family is actually Quebecois. So it's nice that he actually gets to play a Quebecois person in this film. So do with that information what you will. Yeah, representation matters, man. Anyway,
people, absolutely.
Yeah. Anyway, 3 from me and 4 from you. It's a good movie. Definitely see it. So full disclosure, we're going to wrap it up there. Full disclosure, we will almost certainly be off next week for foreseen personal reasons this week. But we'll be back with more after that. If you have enjoyed the conversation, please feel free to offer some support. We would love if you can give us a 5-star review on your podcasting platform of choice, or follow us, subscribe on your podcasting platform of choice, or to help more directly, we do have a Patreon and a Ko-fi, and if you subscribe on Patreon, you do get a bonus episode every week. This week we talked about movies that are so bad they're good, and also our anticipated movies of the year. And I thought it was a fun discussion. I don't know. Am I wrong there, Simon? I don't think I am.
All of our discussions are fun discussions, but this one especially so.
Yeah, that's true. It's the best one since the last one, for sure. I will be putting all of the links, but in particular, there's a Dan Aykroyd documentary. I'll put that in the show notes. And what else was I going to say? Oh yeah, and also visit this episode's homepage at awesomefriday.ca. It'll be one of the more recent episodes, but we do post Just Watch powered links to wherever you can buy, rent, or stream each of these movies that update as availability changes wherever you are in the world. So if you want to watch this film, please consider using those links, because that also helps us keep the lights on here at Awesome Friday HQ. Last but not least, we are located in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, on the unceded and ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations. One last time, thank you so much for listening and for joining us on this awesome Friday.
Bye-bye.